From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Soini Gray. We begin in Nicaragua, where thousands of people are packed into the Plaza de las Victorias in Managua, listening to President Daniel Ortega speak. The rally is in support of peace and in support of President Ortega's call for dialogue. Demonstrators say they are defending their country's sovereignty and their revolution. They say that more now than ever they support the Sandinista government in its efforts to bring about peace following days of violence that took place earlier in the month. Let's take a listen to President Ortega now.
These are situations which have to be investigated so that we can find those that are guilty. No, not to throw ourselves against them full of hatred. Not to throw ourselves with a knife towards them, but instead so that they understand once and for all that Nicaragua has chosen the path of peace, stability, and security.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro held a press conference where he announced a 95% increase to overall salaries to mark International Workers' Day. The president spoke at the Expo Venezuelan Power exhibition, which had an attendance of 302,000 people over a 3-day period. Maduro said that the development of the productive sector is key to mediating the effects of the economic war led by the United States against Venezuela.
And so I have decided to increase the salary, the minimum wage in the country, from 392,000 bolivars today by national decree with the date in April the 15th, and must be deposited today, April 30th, to all public workers at the end of this transmission, to raise it from 392,646 bolivars to 1 million bolivars. That is a new minimum wage for the Venezuelan.
Meanwhile, President Maduro has made his way to the state of Cojades, his latest campaign stop. Starting off his second official week of campaigning in front of a jam-packed audience, Maduro said that it was impressive to see that despite the severity of the economic war on Venezuela, thousands continue to gather at each of his campaign events. The candidate said that he is prepared, ready, and spiritually fit to be re-elected for the 2019-2025 period. And the National Electoral Council, or CNE, has just completed its latest audit as the country moves forward with the electoral process. CNE experts, along with representatives from the various political parties that will participate in the elections, worked on the evaluation. So far, 5 audits are confirming the transparency of the voting process. We now turn to Colombia, where the army has announced that fighting in the Catatumbo region between the National Liberation Army and the Popular Liberation Army has come to an end. After 2 weeks of non-stop confrontation, the Popular Liberation Army said the conflict ended thanks to a petition by the civilian population, who have been severely affected by the crossfire.
EPL's major central state is open to dialogue. We do this in order to solve the differences between the two guerrillas. We want to inform Catatumbo's people that the ceasefire will start on Monday, April 30th at 6 a.m.
More on that announcement in this report.
Today at 6 a.m., after 40 days of clashes between the EPL and the ELN guerrillas, an indefinite ceasefire was declared by the former. A video was sent to different media groups, in which armed men with covered faces and wearing the signs of the group said they will stop the clashes and that they are even willing to talk to the ELN to solve their differences. But this conflict left more than 9,000 victims, who had to leave their homes from different municipalities of Catatumbo. The residents had to look for humanitarian shelters, and they still haven't received any help from the government. Some of them are even living without food or a roof over their heads. These people are really concerned about what comes next. Some other regions, like Cúcuta, recovered their normal lives, but there is a lot of anticipation about what's going to happen with the zones further from the main cities. Just yesterday, there were clashes between these two armed groups, so the situation in inner Catatumbo is still difficult. In spite of the normalization in other areas, people still don't know what the future of those places is, or if there will be peace. To recap, there are more than 9,000 refugees from Catatumbo, and this shows how inefficient has been the government to fill the spaces left by former guerrilla, FARC. Campesino people say that different guerrillas rule these lands only with violence, and that any projects to grow or prosper the area are absent.
And staying with the Colombian peace process, an article published by the Wall Street Journal linking the FARC member Ivan Marquez with drug trafficking is putting the agreement between the FARC and the government of Colombia at risk. Political leaders are warning that the peace process is already very fragile.
Former peace negotiator Humberto de la Calle made a call to the people of Colombia, asking them to defend the country's sovereignty and to not let the opposition groups end in peace in the country.
Peace in the country is at risk. Uribe and Duque are spreading lies and hatred. They are leading part of the population to feel nostalgia for the war. The Constitutional Court has opened the door for Congress to betray the peace agreement.
The call of former chief negotiator comes after the arrest of FARC member Jesus Santrich and the publication of an article in the Wall Street Journal which alleges the possible connection between another FARC member, Ivan Marquez, and drug trafficking organizations.
As soon as the Santrich case became known, I said that he should face consequences if found guilty. I thought this was an isolated case, but in light of what the Wall Street Journal said, some new questions have emerged. The article reaffirmed that there cannot be impunity for the members of the FARC, regardless of the rank. But given the national security interests, I think it is up to the Colombian justice system to decide.
And even though the public prosecutor's office has already said there is no investigation on Ivan Marquez, the Wall Street Journal's article brings the possibility of achieving an already fragile peace agreement even further.
We're going to take a short break now, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting.
And shoot them for what? They never called me nigga. They never lynched me. They never put no dogs on me. They never robbed me of my nationality, raped and killed my mother and father. Well, I'm going to shoot them for what? How am I going to shoot them? Them little poor little black people, little babies and children and women. How can I shoot them poor people? Just take me to jail.
Welcome back. Jamaica's Prime Minister Andrew Holness has attended the launch of the distribution of solar lamps to energy-poor households. In early March, during the budget debate, he announced that 5,000 solar lamps will be distributed throughout the island. He explained this simply wasn't an economic decision, but was inspired by a fire earlier this year that was caused by persons using candles and kerosene lamps, which claimed the lives of 8 adults and 5 children.
Almost every year, as a representative, I've had to deal with burnouts. And MPs would understand what I'm talking about when I say burnouts. Someone's home will be destroyed by fire. And it's not arson, it's that you have an aging housing stock that is primarily sometimes of wood. Some people make their homes out of cardboard, bagasse, find all kinds of materials to build homes which are not necessarily fire resistant.
Trade union member and Lula supporter Jefferson Lima is continuing his recovery and is now said to be out of danger. Lima was shot in the back of the neck and taken to hospital in serious condition after a violent attack on the Lula da Silva Solidarity camp. "38-year-old Jefferson Lima was one of 2 demonstrators injured in the early morning shooting on Saturday, along with 42-year-old Marcia Raj, who was hit in the shoulder by bullet fragments. The shooter reportedly yelled Bolsonaro before opening fire. Bolsonaro is the name of the far-right candidate running for presidential office in October. And here's our correspondent with a full update from Brazil.
2 people were injured in the early morning Saturday attack on the Marisa Leticia camp, which is being held in support of former President Lula da Silva. One of them was taken to the intensive care unit in a Curitiba, Paraná hospital. The camp was hit by 20 high-caliber shots. Police are now investigating, saying that the weapon used was a 9mm handgun. The Workers' Party have released a statement in which it says that this attack is another violent political attack against democracy, taking place around a month after former President Lula da Silva's caravan was shot at. The Workers' Party says that all of this is evidence of a climate of hate within the country in which attacks against social leaders have been increasing ever since the coup against former President Dilma Rousseff. Rousseff herself has also made a statement regarding the shooting at the camp in Curitiba, saying that the architects of the coup have planted hate and violence. President of the Workers' Party, Gleisi Hoffmann, also said on Twitter that they demand that security authorities investigate and take all available measures to determine who is responsible for the attack. There were also other messages saying that this will not get in the way of the fight for the release of former President Lula. The Lula Solidarity camps will continue. At this time, the organizers and party leaders are meeting with security officials of the state of Paraná to evaluate the situation, and representatives of the camp are demanding that those responsible are brought to justice.
We thank Adriana for that report. Meanwhile, the current Brazilian President Michel Temer has cancelled his tour to Southeast Asia, originally scheduled for May 7th to May 14th. This is the second time Temer cancelled the tour. The decision comes after an ongoing investigation linked him, once again, to corruption. Temer was allegedly involved in laundering money in the residences belonging to some of his relatives, including his daughter. And Barbados is on an election footing with the date set for May 24th. The opposition Barbados Labour Party held a campaign rally in the form of a picnic at Barclay Park over the weekend. Opposition leader Mia Mottley presided over a sea of red and told the crowd that her government intends to restore hope on the island.
So we have work to do, because you know, as Bob Marley would say, who feels it knows it. You who were sent home from NCC and Purified Barbados and Transport Board and National Housing, you feel it and you know it. Those of you who have not been able to get a job since leaving school,
The construction workers of Panama are not backing down from their strike and are holding out for a wage increase more in line with industry profits. Our correspondent in Panama, Hugo Vera, has more.
It's another week of the construction workers' union strike that began on April 18, ongoing because of a standoff on a wage increase for employees. The offer made by the Panamanian Chamber of Construction hasn't improved. It's a yearly increase of 5 cents per hour, while the union is still demanding a 10.9% increase over the next 4 years. They consider the offer that the businessmen are making mismatched to the profits of the industry, which in the last 4 years has generated $36 billion, 30 of them net profit. The strike is set to continue until the offer is raised. The hold-on work has stalled 95% of the nation's construction projects. This is one of the biggest industries in the country and contributes to almost 30% of its GDP.
Hugo Vera for that report. In Chile, protesters have marched in Santiago, calling for the right to grow their own marijuana for medicinal and recreational use. Demonstrators, some of whom were smoking, gathered at Italia Square and then slowly walked to Los Héroes in the center of the Chilean capital, holding banners, balloons, and marijuana plants. And over to Mexico now, where an artist is filling Mexico City's public spaces with art with the help of the neighborhood.
Tools with him. He's an artist that has made the park his workplace. Here in Colonia Escandón, a mural with pre-Hispanic images has benefited the community in its 3 years of development. It is a piece of collective art.
It's therapy for me to come here and see how it has progressed and see the people that come here to support the project.
This mural project doesn't receive funding from any institution. It's being done out of the love for art. The neighborhood helps because they want to see it finished.
It's to support this cultural movement that he started in this park, to see it move forward and all done.
The muralist works with a unique crayon technique. According to him, awakening the artistic curiosity in the neighborhood is one of his achievements.
They ask me if they help me, and yes, they do, even though they don't know about art, but they do have a great interest.
He is awakening the public interest in Mexico's history, as he mixes in his work with several pre-Hispanic cultures, like the Tolteca, Zapoteca, and Maya.
There are kids that have already gone to the archaeological complex of Teotihuacan, families that go to museums and that have had valuable experiences.
The mural is titled The Heart of the Mountain, and by the time it's finished, it will occupy a total area of 120 square meters. Ricardo's goal is to fill all public spaces of the Mexican capital with art.
We're going to take a short break, but join us again after another look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. In the United Kingdom, Amber Rudd has resigned as Home Secretary over her mishandling of the Windrush Generation scandal. She was accused of setting up immigrant removal targets. Long-term UK residents from the Caribbean have been threatened with deportation to countries they left as children as many as 50 years ago and have not returned to since. Others have been denied access to health care, have lost their jobs, or have been made homeless because of the crisis. And Rudd has been replaced by Sahid Javid. He is the country's first Home Secretary from an ethnic minority group. UK Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn is publicly putting pressure on Javid to reverse the harsh policies of his predecessor Rudd and the current British Prime Minister Theresa May.
I'll have confidence if he makes it very, very clear that he will deal with the issues that Amber Rudd failed to deal with, that he will deal with the issue of the hostile environment created by her and by her predecessor as Home Secretary, now the Prime Minister, and that he will guarantee absolutely security, safety for the Windrush generation who contributed so much to our country and are now being put through the most appalling trauma.
And the Shadow Home Secretary Diane Abbott has accused Theresa May of being responsible for discriminating against the Windrush Generation immigrants.
I think all roads lead back to Theresa May and her tenure as Home Secretary. Many of the elements of this hostile environment were originated under Theresa May, and most important of all, it was in 2014 that she passed legislation which removed the protection from deportation, which up until then had applied to Commonwealth citizens.
Telesur caught up with the feminist social academic Selma James at a Windrush protest outside Parliament, who told us exactly what she thought of the British leadership's handling of the crisis.
When you label some people as deserving of hostility, that's called racism. And that's what people from the Caribbean and many other people in this country, people of color, and people who had foreign accents, that's what people have had to bear. And now everybody knows there is justice to their case.
We go to our correspondent in London, Pablo Navarrete, who brings us more details on the political turmoil caused by the Windrush scandal in the United Kingdom.
The Windrush citizenship scandal claimed its first major political scalp on Sunday when the Home Office Minister, effectively the Minister of the Interior, Amber Rudd, resigned, saying she had inadvertently misled Parliament last week when she testified regarding alleged quotas in her department for the deportation of illegal immigrants. She had denied at the time that there were any, or that she was aware of any, and it later transpires, due to a letter published yesterday by the British newspaper The Guardian, that she had written to British Prime Minister Theresa May saying that they would seek to deport 10% more illegal immigrants, bringing her position under intense pressure from across the political parties, and she resigned yesterday, something that Theresa May agreed to. Now, the Windrush citizenship scandal has dominated the British media and political discussions in the last 2 weeks. Centres around the children of Caribbean people that came to Britain, invited by the British government following the Second World War from 1940 to 1970, and who have effectively been deemed illegal immigrants by the British government recently, in some cases because of their failure to regularise their status. There have been very powerful stories in the British media of the human cost of what's happened. People have been deported, they've been imprisoned, they've lost jobs, they've lost homes, and it has resonated and caused widespread anger not only amongst the Caribbean community but across British society. So now Amber Rudd has resigned, but there is now a renewed focus on asking about British Prime Minister Theresa May, who was Amber Rudd's predecessor and who first enacted the very harsh rhetorical and legislative policies with regards to immigration and making Britain a hostile place. So Theresa May is now facing a lot of pressure to answer for her role in all of this. Today, for example, there is a protest outside Parliament to protest the issue in general. Initially, it had been called to protest Amber Rudd's position, but now I imagine there will be calls for Theresa May also to resign. So this is the latest with the Windrush citizenship scandal.
We thank Pablo Navarrete for that report. We now return to Caracas, where our correspondent Ian Bruce attended this morning's President Maduro's press conference at the last day of Expo Venezuela. We join him now live to discuss his economic announcements. Ian, President Maduro announced these increases just ahead of May Day. How significant is that?
Well, Soini, it's the announcement of wage increases for May Day has become something of a tradition here in Venezuela, but this one was particularly important because of the very high inflation which is dramatically eroding workers' wages. And President Maduro made clear that it's always been a principle of the Bolivarian revolution to do what it can to protect workers' living standards and all Venezuelans' living standards. But this is in fact the 22nd time that President Nicolas Maduro has increased the minimum wage, and this one was really a big one. The basic minimum wage has gone up from slightly less than 400,000 bolivars a month to 1 million bolivars a month, and the food stamps, which is the other part that makes up most people's basic income, has gone up to 1.5 million bolivars a month. That means that the basic guaranteed minimum income now stands at 2.5 million bolivars a month. However, President Maduro also made clear that this simply isn't enough. This is a measure to protect people's wages as far as they can, but a more fundamental solution is required.
Ian, President Maduro spoke a lot about how his responsibility as president
he went on to say that what is really needed is to tackle this, what the government calls the economic war, which has been, as far as the government concerned, is pushing up inflation at these dramatic levels, essentially on the basis of a speculation that these are really artificial prices, but they are fundamentally undermining people's well-being. And he said he believes, and this Expo Venezuela 2018 event over the last few days has shown that Venezuela has everything it needs to have a healthy, productive economy. But in fact, just to make that clear, I visited the stand of a small company that's making quality sports shoes, football boots, other kinds of sports shoes, and selling them very successfully, including in parts of the Caribbean. And he said, this is the kind of thing that Venezuela can do, and it needs to do if it's to develop a healthy economy. But he said what needs to be done first is to get through these elections, to win these elections on the 20th of May, and then dedicated everybody's efforts towards rebuilding a healthy economy in Venezuela. And interestingly, he said that also means restructuring the government. He said the government needs to be much more efficient, and one of the ways he wants to do this from the 1st of June, if he wins those elections on the 20th of May, is to go out into the streets, take his government into the streets. This is something they did some years ago, what they call government in the streets, to tackle the economic problems and develop this healthy, stable economy that can return some kind of normality to most Venezuelans' lives on a more stable and long-term basis.
Thank you so much for that update. We've been speaking to our correspondent in Caracas, Ian Bruce. We're going to be checking in with Ian all the way up to Election Day of May 20th. Now, that conversation has brought us right to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our Tell Us Your English website, tellusyourtv.net/English. And we are going to leave you with images of the ongoing walk for peace and dialogue currently taking place in Nicaragua. Earlier, we heard President Daniel Ortega speaking. The rally is going on. Now, for more on that, you can also join us on social media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I'm Soini Gray. Thank you so much for watching.